In this video, I wanted to share with you a few healthy, delicious, and budget-friendly meals that I made for my family of 6 this week, starting with a heartier tomato soup with some added plant-based protein. This recipe is awesome because you make it in the Instant Pot. There's hardly any prep and it cooks up in such a short amount of time. And of course, I had to make up some homemade bread to go with it so we could have some grilled cheese sandwiches. So I'm sharing my same-day cheater sourdough bread recipe. And then I made some loaded baked potatoes and some comforting homemade chicken soup with bone broth because we had a snow day and also some sick kids, so this was the perfect meal to finish the week. So I like to mill my own grains. This is optional, obviously, but I really enjoy it. So I have weighed out 450 grams of wheat berries. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this into flour and get going with my recipe. This bread that I'm making isn't a true sourdough because I'm not doing a long ferment. I'm doing it quickly and I'm adding yeast to this because I think there's value in baking a loaf of bread that can be ready in the same day. And having milled the grains myself, I feel like it's a great alternative if you do want sourdough, but you also need it quickly. I am including starter in this recipe, but I'm including yeast as well. So it just kind of speeds up the process. The flour won't be fully fermented, but I'm okay with that because like I said, I'm using this organic, freshly milled flour and I feel really good about that. When I was actually filming for this recipe, I made some mistakes, but I've since tested it and so I can share it with you confidently. Into the bread bowl, you're going to add 285 grams of water, 50 grams of melted butter, which is about 1/4 cup, 80 grams of honey, 10 grams of salt, 1 teaspoon of yeast, 140 grams of active sourdough starter, and 500 grams of flour. Add that all to the bread machine bowl and set it to the leaven cycle, which is option number 12 on this KBS bread machine. The secret ingredient in this recipe are these split pigeon peas. I just bought a big bag at Costco one day because they're very high in protein. And I just thought, that sounds nice. For this Instant Pot tomato soup, just give 3 to 4 whole carrots a rough chop as well as a whole onion and 4 cloves of garlic. I forgot to add a red pepper, but you can add that. You can also add other veggies if you'd like. You can experiment here. Turn on the saute function on your Instant Pot. Make sure it's very hot. Add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Saute your veggies. Add a teaspoon of salt to sweat those veggies, and then add in garlic a little later along with all of your seasonings and tomato paste. I used 2 teaspoons of salt, a teaspoon of pepper, a teaspoon of dried oregano, a teaspoon of dried basil. Optional, you can add a tablespoon of honey here and give it all a good mix to really bloom all those flavors together. And then I added a small handful of walnuts and just toast those up a little bit. And then you're gonna add, I did add a teaspoon of chili powder here. I just wanted to try that. And then you can add in a cup of split pigeon peas. This is what's gonna add all that protein to this tomato soup. And the tomatoes really mask the flavor of this. Then you're gonna add in your homemade, hopefully homemade chicken broth, but you can use any chicken broth here. I used about 4 cups and a can of crushed tomatoes. San Marzano is preferred, but I just had a cheap can of crushed tomatoes from Aldi available, and that works just fine as well. Put the lid back on, seal it, set it for 15 minutes, and let that cook. I came back to check my dough and I always forget how quickly bread rises when you add yeast. I'm so used to doing sourdough and having just so much time to let it develop. So my bread was like super proofed and it was starting to like come off the sides of the pan. So I just sort of like popped the bubble and let it kind of go back down, but just so you can see what I'm talking about. Because the bread machine is warm, it really just like it's the perfect environment for rising bread, and sometimes it moves even faster than I anticipate. So I would say maybe add a little bit less yeast if you want to buy yourself some more time. I'll have to experiment with that and see how it goes, but it's still gonna be fine. I'm gonna put this on the counter and shape it into a loaf and put it in a loaf pan, and I'll bake it. Now, I do not want this dough rising anymore, so I'm actually gonna stick it in the fridge, and when I get closer to dinner, I will preheat the oven, take it straight from the fridge, and put it in the oven to bake it. When your soup is done cooking, it's going to be piping hot, so be careful as you use an immersion blender to puree the whole soup until it's smooth, and then add in about a half cup of cream or half and half, and then a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. At this point, your oven should be preheated to 375, and I bake my bread for about 45 minutes or until the internal temp is at 190.
Isn't that good at baking?
Okay, well, my bread is giant. I don't know if this can... No. Come on. Stay. So I definitely overproofed the dough, so I would say just keep an eye on it when it's in the bread machine. I've been watching it to see if it's gonna get any bigger. Check.
Yes.
Nope, nope. 166 needs to be 190.
Oops, you're not even close.
No.
I need to feel with my...
When your bread is done, set it on a cooling rack and butter the top and let it cool as long as you can, because when you cut it, it's going to still be very soft. And so I'm using a special knife here for cutting sourdough, and I'm also being very gentle and holding the top of the loaf while I cut it. This bread is delicate because it hasn't fully cooled yet, but we still are going to use it.
Well, he doesn't really have to, and he walked, it was so fun.
Oh yeah, go ahead and put
Mom,
that
can I have
over
this
here.
one, please? Mom, can I please have this
Good
one?
job.
I'll stick it.
You want to keep an eye on this for me, Joseph? Let
I
me just butter it.
I can flip it, please. Can I
Okay, Felicity wants to do hers. I posted the full recipe for this soup on my blog, which is linked below. This is such a great, comforting meal that my whole family loves. And if you are making the bread yourself and making the broth yourself, this ends up being a super affordable dinner for a family of 6. Good evening. It is dinner time and I am making loaded baked potatoes. And I like this meal because you just basically put this all in the oven and pop it out, and you're gonna have sort of like a customizable meal because everyone can top their potatoes however they want. So I'm gonna cook up this bacon, and I just learned a new method of cooking bacon. You're gonna lay it all out on a sheet pan like this. I lined mine with foil so that I don't have to clean the pan. And you're going to put this into a cold oven, turn it on to 400 degrees. Gotta wash my hands. Okay, we're gonna turn it on to 400 degrees. And about when it gets to 400 degrees, it will almost be done. So this prevents the bacon from burning and gives it that perfect crisp that we all love. I've actually never done it this way, so we'll find out if it's gonna work. So anyways, while this is cooking, I'm gonna get my potatoes ready and we'll get dinner going. I also need to clean my kitchen. The neat thing about this recipe is when you put the bacon in and you're preheating the oven, by the time the bacon is finished, the oven is ready for the potatoes to go in. I feel like this is a really efficient and streamlined way to cook dinner, and I can clean and do lots of other odds and ends while things are cooking. I like to use russet potatoes and sweet potatoes for this recipe. You just need to wash them, coat them in olive oil and salt. Also stab some holes in the sweet potatoes, and you may need to pull the sweet potatoes out before the russet potatoes. The oven is fully preheated, and oh my gosh, I'm here to tell you that it absolutely works. That looks so good. I'm using some of the oil from the bacon to get my skillet ready because I'm going to brown some ground beef and season that up with some onions and all sorts of things to put on top of the potatoes. I like this seasoning blend. I just picked it up one day at Costco. It works great as a savory seasoned blend, and I added some garlic, onion, smoked paprika, and pepper. So we're going for a savory spice mix instead of like a Mexican blend of spices. I'm also adding some tomato paste because it adds some umami to your dish. It just enhances the flavor. The potatoes are still baking. I put them in the oven at 425 for about 45 minutes. And then I am now preparing my toppings. I'm just doing some shredded lettuce and cheeses, sour cream, some quick pickled red onions, and crumbled up bacon. And then we'll add the ground beef as well. This all together makes a very, very delicious meal. And it's very filling and healthy. The whole family loves it. And each person can pick and choose what they want to do with their potato. I like to have these quick pickled red onions on hand. They're very easy to make, and they make a great topping for sandwiches and tacos. You just add a half cup of very hot water into a jar, and then a half cup of apple cider vinegar, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of sugar, and some peppercorns. Just mix it up and let the red onions soak in that mixture. It will be ready in as quickly as 30 minutes, but tastes even better as it sits throughout the week in your fridge. The next day was a snow day, which is an extremely rare event here in Georgia, and so my house was buzzing with excitement. I decided to make some sourdough discard cranberry scones for breakfast, and then for dinner, I wanted to make some chicken soup. My daughter had a sore throat, and I thought this would be the perfect meal for a snowy evening. I also had some nourishing bone broth that was ready to be used. If you saw my last video, I shared how I make bone broth in the Instant Pot, and this time I used the carcass of a whole chicken that we had cooked a while back, and I had put the bones in the freezer, so I had that ready to go for this soup tonight. Before I make the chicken, I'm gonna first cook the chicken breasts. So you're gonna sear the chicken really well on each side, and then you can put the lid on your pot and turn the stove down to low, set a timer for 10 minutes, and then turn the stove off completely and set another timer for 10 minutes, and your chicken breasts will be perfect. They will be tender and easy to cut. So I'm also gonna add some fresh parsley and a lot of minced garlic. These are all great for your immune system when you're sick. I also have yellow miso paste and lemon, which I'm gonna use as a bit of a flavor boost for this soup. Let that liquid reduce down from the chicken. You may need to add a little bit of extra oil here and then saute your veggies. Add a teaspoon of salt and then put the lid on top and be patient because the veggies will release a lot of flavor during this time. I just went out into the freezing cold to get sage, and it is frozen, but I think it's still gonna be good and it's gonna be worth it. So here's my frozen sage. Then push your veggies to the side of the pan, add a little bit of olive oil and saute your garlic, your herbs, and then also I added a little bit of miso here. For my dry herbs, I used a teaspoon of thyme. Give those all about a minute and then add in your chicken, all of your chicken broth, and season it with salt and pepper to taste and let it simmer for as long as you need to. Obviously, the longer it simmers, the more the flavor develops, but you also don't want your veggies turning into mush. I served this with a splash of lemon juice and also some fresh parsley. And then of course I had to make some of my same day sourdough bread. So we had some warm bread and butter with this delicious soup. I hope you enjoyed these 3 simple, frugal meals. As you can see, it doesn't require a lot of expensive or fancy ingredients, and a home-cooked meal is a simple joy that adds that atmosphere of love and comfort and togetherness to your home. I've posted some links in the description for some of my kitchen favorites and also 2 of the recipes from this video, the tomato soup and also my same-day sourdough bread. All right, thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.